Good afternoon, everybody. And for those of you that are watching in other time zones, good morning, maybe. We welcome to our third virtual learning experience. We're so excited that we're going to be here in Yellowstone. That's one of my favorite national parks. It's one of our first national parks. And we've got someone great that's going to share all about Yellowstone National Park and some of the history and ecology and all about the wildlife. There's so much to share. And I'm going to introduce Ranger Michael, who's with us today from Yellowstone National Park. And it's still morning there in Yellowstone, there in parts of Wyoming and Montana. Ranger Michael, welcome. And why don't you go ahead and get started?
All right. Well, thanks for inviting me. My name's Michael. I'm talking to you from the world's very first national park, Yellowstone National Park. It's a really amazing place to be a national park. Land has to be so special, so awesome that our whole country wants to protect it forever and leave it beautiful and leave it wild so that everyone in the future can enjoy it. And Yellowstone's been a national park for 150 years. So it's been the very first place that got called a national park. So I want to tell you all about this amazing place. We'll see if you guys have any questions I can answer at some point. Let me show you where Yellowstone is. It's pretty far away from Florida. I'm going to show you a map here. Here's Florida. If you go all the way across America to the Rocky Mountains, where that star is, that's where Yellowstone is. So Yellowstone is part of Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho. It's where those three states come together. So I'm talking to you from that spot right now. It'll be lunchtime after I'm done talking to you. And we are up in the mountains here, so it is different than Florida. This is what it looked like in Yellowstone about a month ago. Up in the mountains, we had so much snow, and we've been plowing and plowing. We're hoping to get all the roads plowed by this weekend for the holiday traffic. So there's a lot of snow here, but spring is coming. I've been seeing some signs of spring. Some of the birds that only come to Yellowstone in the summer are here. So these are two of my favorites that have come back for spring. We have some animals that sleep all winter in their burrows, and they're starting to wake up. This one's called a marmot. Marmot's kind of like a woodchuck or a groundhog that lives in the mountains, but we didn't see them all winter, but we're starting to see them now. And my favorite sign of spring is that the bison have been having their calves. We have a lot of baby bison running around in the park. They're very cute. And any day now, I'm expecting to see the first baby elk around the park. So spring is coming, and we're gearing up for all the people who want to visit Yellowstone in summer. So I'm going to show you some pictures of Yellowstone National Park. So here's what it looks like when you arrive at Yellowstone National Park. This is one of our many entrances. Now, this picture was not taken today, so there'd be a little less snow today. Today we have mostly green. It's all green and grassy here. It's nice, but Yellowstone is part of the mountains. We're part of the Rocky Mountains. So some of the mountains here get to be 12,000 feet above sea level. So that means if you were standing on the beach in Palm Beach and I was standing on top of a mountain here at Yellowstone, I would be about 2 miles higher up than you would be. And we still have a lot of snow up in the mountains here. Then we have a lot of forest. All this dark color here, that is all forest, pine trees mostly, millions and millions and millions of pine trees. And in Yellowstone, the park is mostly covered with pine forests that have never, ever been cut. But we do have some grasslands too, and they're looking nice and green and grassy compared to when this picture was taken. But the grasslands are nice because there's no trees in the way, and you can see the many wild animals that live here at Yellowstone. If you're a good noticer, you might have noticed that there are some animals in this picture. Did you spot them? Right around in the right side of the picture, there's some little spots there. Those are elk. I'll show you a closer picture of elk as we go a little farther. But that's what you see right away when you arrive at Yellowstone. But there's so much more. This is what the whole national park looks like. Yellowstone National Park is more than 50 miles across. It's bigger than some of the states in the United States. You could take Delaware and Rhode Island and put them both inside Yellowstone, and there would still be room left over. So there's a whole lot of stuff to see and do here. I'm talking to you from right around here. There's kind of a steamy looking hill near the bottom. It's called the Mammoth Hot Springs. And I'm in a building close to that. The buildings are such a small part of Yellowstone that they don't even show up in this picture. But that's where I am. And Florida is about 4 days drive off this direction. It's pretty far away. There's another national park in this picture. Those mountains in the background are the Grand Tetons. That's another awesome national park here in Wyoming. But most of this picture is Yellowstone National Park. It's a very big place. We've got the Rocky Mountains. We've got a really big lake. It's the biggest mountain lake in North America. And coming out of that lake is the river that our park is named after. This is called the Yellowstone River. It was named by the Native Americans hundreds of years ago, long before Yellowstone became a national park. There have been Native American, indigenous people coming to the park. At least 27 tribes have a strong connection to this park, and they've been coming for thousands and thousands of years. And at some point, one of those tribes named this river the Yellowstone River. Now, we don't know where they saw those Yellowstones, but the name of that river has stuck in the language of the Native Americans, the language of the French, the language of the English. The same name has been given to that river. And since that river goes right through the middle of our park, that's what our park is named after, the Yellowstone River. The most famous part of the river is this canyon right here, where the river drops over a cliff with a beautiful waterfall and into this really scenic canyon. But you can see that Yellowstone is mostly just wild land, hardly any roads or buildings. It's mostly just wild habitats, forests and meadows and mountains and water, just awesome places for animals to live wild and free, and people can hike on 1,000 miles of trails to see all the things in the park. A really interesting thing about Yellowstone is it is the site of the world's biggest volcano. The volcano's been pretty quiet for many thousands of years, but it had a major eruption 640,000 years ago. And at that time, all the mountains that used to be in the right side of the picture, they got blown up in that gigantic volcanic eruption. So it made like a big crater here from that big explosion. But that was a very long time ago. So nature has come back, and there's forests and meadows and animals and a lot of beautiful scenery in that part of the park now. But you might notice there's some steam coming out of the park in certain places because that volcano is still there. It's sitting under the earth. If you could see into the underground at Yellowstone, about 5 miles below the surface, there's a big chamber of magma. Magma's like lava that's inside the earth. It's what happens when rocks get so hot that they melt. And this magma's coming up from deep down inside the earth, and it's just sitting under Yellowstone. We do get some earthquakes from it once in a while, like we had a pretty big one last week. But mostly that heat is just sitting under the park. And so what it does is it heats the water. Yellowstone's a pretty cold place, but when the water goes into the ground, like when it rains or when the snow melts and the water goes into the underground, that water gets hot. And so as you travel around Yellowstone Park, you can find 10,000 places where hot water is coming out of the ground or steam is coming out of the ground, really hot water. The most common way we see that is hot springs. Now, Florida has some hot springs too. A hot spring is when hot water is coming up out of the ground and making a pool of hot water at the surface. And we have thousands and thousands of hot springs in Yellowstone. They come in all different sizes, big ones, little ones, deep ones, shallow ones. Some of them have bubbles in them from the gases that come up there. The biggest one of all is the one in the upper left picture there. It's called the Grand Prismatic Spring. It's as big as a football field across. You might notice there's some people in the background, those little figures back there. Those are people. The people are walking on a boardwalk, a wooden trail that keeps them a little bit above the ground because we don't want people walking in that very, very hot water. The water in these pools can be 150 to 200 degrees, hot enough to cook you or burn you. So we want people to be safe. So people walk on these wooden trails. And if you stay on that wooden boardwalk, you can get a pretty nice look at the pool. Some of the pools have pretty beautiful colors in them from little tiny living things called bacteria that can live in water that would cook us. And those bacteria are really, really tiny, but there's so many of them that you can actually see their colors. Each color you see in this pool is a different kind of bacteria. They each grow in the part of the pool that's their favorite temperature. So it looks like in this big pool, there's yellow bacteria that like the really hot water. There's orange bacteria that like the water that's pretty hot. And there's a brownish bacteria that like the water that's just a little bit warm. So they each grow in their favorite part of the pool, and it creates a rainbow of colors in a lot of our pools. Some of the pools are so hot, though, that not even the bacteria can live in them, and they just look clear and colorless. The Mammoth Hot Springs is that steaming hill that I told you is close to where I am right now. The word mammoth means really big. This is one of the biggest hot spring formations in the world. It's a mountain that was made by rocks that the hot water brought from underground and left on the surface. So every day, more rock is being added to the Mammoth Hot Springs. So it keeps on growing and changing. In general, it looks like a big hill full of stair-like rock formations. And a lot of those stairs have a pool of warm water in it. And then the warm water is trickling down the sides of the hill, causing it to change and grow. One of the most famous things at Yellowstone is geysers. Geysers is when the hot water shoots up out of the ground like a fountain of hot water. So these can shoot anywhere from a few feet off the ground to hundreds of feet into the air. So there's all different geysers. Yellowstone has the most geysers of anywhere in the world. There's about 500 geysers at Yellowstone Park. That's more than all the other places in the world put together. So this is a great place to see geysers. Most of them, we don't know when they're going to shoot off. It just kind of surprises you when it happens. But there's some geysers that follow a pattern, and we can guess when they're going to erupt again. And the most famous predictable geyser is named Old Faithful Geyser. It's called Faithful because you can trust it. It has an eruption every hour and a half. And it does that all day, all night, all the time. Every hour and a half, it has a big eruption. It's not the biggest geyser of all, but it's pretty big. It shoots its water 130 feet in the air. That means you would have to stack about 22 dads on top of each other to be as tall as Old Faithful Geyser. When it erupts, it lasts about 6 minutes. And then an hour and a half later, it does it again. So thousands of people come to see each one of its eruptions. We also have mud pots at Yellowstone. Mud pots are kind of fun because they're pools of hot mud with steam coming out of them. And the steam makes big bubbles in the mud. And when the bubbles pop, mud goes flying into the air. So they're really fun to watch. Imagine looking at a big pond full of thick mud, and it's hundreds of bubbles are popping every second, and then little globs of mud are flying around. So they're really fun to watch. But mud pots are very stinky. They have a gas in them that smells like rotten eggs. So every one of your senses can notice something from the mud pots. We also have some very cold water at Yellowstone. Yellowstone Lake is the biggest mountain lake in North America. It's a really big, cold lake. Its water comes not from underground, but from the mountains. We have mountains all around this lake, and it can snow any day of the year in the mountains. And when the snow melts, that cold water from the melted snow goes down into the lake. And so the lake is cold all the time. In winter, the top of it freezes, and in summer, the water's only about 40 degrees. So as soon as you step in the water, you can't feel your legs anymore. And if you spend too much time in the water, you could get hypothermia and maybe drown. So we don't get too many swimmers at Yellowstone. It's too cold to go swimming at Yellowstone. But the lake is so beautiful that people like to go hiking there and fishing there and boating there. So people just love looking at the lake. It's so beautiful. It's over 100 miles around. The water is super clean, and it's surrounded by beautiful mountains and forests. It's a great place to see some wildlife. The water's so clear that you might be able to see the fish. The kind of fish that's most common at Yellowstone is called the cutthroat trout. They have red gills, so it kind of looks like they cut their throat. They didn't really, it's just red. But then a lot of birds come and try to catch the fish. This is an osprey that just caught a fish in its talons. We also see a lot of bald eagles and white pelicans at Yellowstone Lake. And here's another marmot, that chubby hibernating animal that we have here at the park. And then here is the Yellowstone River that our park is named after. This river goes for many, many miles all through this park. But this is the most famous part here, where the river goes through this beautiful canyon. The geysers actually made the rock softer in this part of the park, which allowed the river to carve down into that softer rock. And since the water carved into the soft rock, but couldn't carve through the hard rock in the background, it made a 300-foot drop in the river, which created this big waterfall. Yellowstone Park has 200 waterfalls. This is the biggest of all of them. It's called the Lower Falls of the Yellowstone River. It's over 300 feet tall. You would have to stack about 51 dads on top of each other to be as tall as this waterfall. And there's some snow in the picture there too. The water is so clear in the rivers of Yellowstone that when the sun shines through it, the water acts like a crystal and sometimes looks colorful to our eyes, just like a crystal would. We have so many wild animals living at Yellowstone. Since it's such a big wild land, we have so many different kinds of animals that roam wild and free here in the park. There are 67 kinds of mammals and 300 kinds of birds who live here. Now, compared to Florida, we have hardly any reptiles or amphibians. Those animals like to live in a warm place, and Yellowstone's pretty cold. So we only have a few snakes and lizards and frogs in Yellowstone, not too many. But we have lots of furry and feathery animals. Now, you're never going to see all the animals standing together like this picture shows. This is a painting that just shows you a sample of some of the animals who live in Yellowstone. But in real nature, you don't generally see all the species hanging out together like this shows. Let me show you a few close-ups of some of the animals. This one's the mule deer. Now in Florida, you have the white-tailed deer, which also lives in Yellowstone. But the more common deer in Yellowstone is called the mule deer. It's called that because they have long ears like a mule or a donkey. And look at how close it is to the hot spring here. A lot of the hoofed animals in Yellowstone like to be close to the geysers in winter because they like to eat grass. And I showed you how much snow we get here at Yellowstone. Imagine if you were looking for grass and there was all that snow in the way. So a lot of these hoofed animals have figured out that if you go close to the hot springs, the ground is warm and the snow melts pretty fast. And you can find grass growing even in the winter. So a lot of these animals come close to the hot springs in winter to find the plants growing there. It's risky though, because they could step in the wrong place and get burnt. And once in a while, an animal does get burnt by a hot spring, but most of them seem to know how close they can get and still find some good grass there. An even larger deer that we have here at Yellowstone is the elk. An elk is a deer that's about 6 feet tall, like about as tall as a man. And we have thousands and thousands of elk living in Yellowstone. The females and the babies tend to all live together in very big groups. Sometimes you'll see hundreds of elk in the same meadow. And they like to be together for protection, so they can all watch out for danger together. The males, the boy elk, they usually spend time by themselves most of the year. Now you can tell the males because they grow a pair of antlers every year. Antlers are bones that grow out of your head, sort of like horns do, but antlers fall off every year. Just like you might have lost a tooth and then a new tooth grew in, the elk lose their antlers every year. And then on the next year, a new set of antlers grows. So this guy's antlers are they're about halfway grown in this picture. It takes them all summer to grow their antlers, and then they use them for fighting with each other. Whoever wins the fights gets to have the most females as their girlfriends. And then over the winter, the antlers fall off, and then they start growing a new set. So I want to show you an antler from a Yellowstone elk. So before I show it to you, though, an antler that we found lying on the ground, before I show it to you, show the people you're with how big you think it is. Show your guess. How big do you think an elk antler would be? Did you guess this big? This is how big an antler is on a typical Yellowstone elk. This is about 3.5 feet long. If I set it on the ground, it comes to the top of my belly. This weighs almost as much as a gallon of milk. Can you imagine carrying 2 gallons of milk on your head just so you can get girlfriends? It's a lot of work. Next, I want to show you the skull of the largest animal who lives here at Yellowstone. This is the skull of the bison, or also called a buffalo. Now, bison grow horns. Horns have a bone inside them, but the actual horn is made of the same stuff as fingernails are. It's called keratin. And horns don't fall off. If you're an animal with horns, you get to keep your horns your whole life. They don't fall off. And usually the males and the females grow the horns. But look at how big this bison is. Bison are really, really large. Their head, just their head, can weigh about the same as a 5th grader. So imagine getting to see how big these animals are. Imagine carrying the weight of a 5th grader on your neck. John, can we see the picture? So here's the bison. I told you the bison just this past month have been having their babies. Their babies are about the size of a dog when they're born. They have reddish hair, but they grow up very quickly. By the age of 2, they're already adults. And an adult bison can weigh 2,000 pounds. So imagine how big that would be. Huge, huge animals. Just their head can weigh 80 to 100 pounds. Can you imagine carrying around the weight of a 5th grader on your neck? You would want to have a really strong neck. So the bison have developed this big hump in their neck. And inside that hump, they have extra bones and extra muscles that give their neck super strength so they can hold up that giant head. So the reason they have that giant head is because it helps them get their food. Bison eat grass mostly. And as I keep telling you, we get a lot of snow here at Yellowstone. So they need to move the grass out of the way. The elk will use their hooves to move the grass, but the bison go to the deeper snow and they use their heads. They take their giant head and they push the snow out of the way like a snow plow. And they can actually plow through the snow and find the grass growing underneath. So a bison is adapted to be a big furry snow plow. And that's how they get their food. These are all of the hoofed animals who live at Yellowstone Park. So we have quite a few of them. I've mentioned a lot of them. One you might not be familiar with in Florida is the pronghorn. The pronghorn is the fastest animal in America. They can run about 60 miles per hour. That's like a car on the freeway. They're super speedy. They kind of look like antelope, so a lot of people call them antelope. They're not really related to antelope you might see in Africa or Asia, but in America, they're often referred to as antelope. Maybe you know the song about how the deer and the antelope play. That's the animal that they're singing about in that song. They're pretty common in the grasslands of Montana and Wyoming. Up in the mountains here at Yellowstone, we have the bighorn sheep. These are amazing wild sheep that have hooves that can go up and down stone cliffs pretty easily without falling. They have a really good grip with their hooves, so they can go up and down the mountains pretty easily. All of the adults grow horns. This is the female. Her horns are fairly normal looking. But the males, which are called rams, the males have these big, giant, curly horns that are kind of like a helmet because they like to bash their heads together to see who can get more females. They have these fights by bashing their heads together. So here is a horn from a bighorn sheep. So the longer they live, the bigger the horns get. Horns don't fall off every year like antlers do. So the longer you live, the bigger your horns get. At Yellowstone, we have 2 kinds of bears. Before I show you the pictures of the bears, I would like to show you their claws. The 2 different bears live in 2 different habitats, so they have different kinds of claws. We have the black bear, which also lives in Florida, but then we also have the grizzly bear, which only lives in the western United States and Canada. So Let me show you their paws first. The one who lives in the forest is the black bear. Here's a paw from a black bear that died, and we were able to preserve its paw. Look at the claws on there. These claws are very good for climbing trees. They have a good grip, so they can grip the bark of a tree, and they can go up to the top of a tree in seconds. So black bears live in the forest, and they're really good at climbing trees. The other kind of bear who lives here at Yellowstone is the grizzly bear, and they live in the grasslands where there aren't a lot of trees, so they don't have to be that great at climbing. They are very good at climbing, but they're not as good as the black bear. But their claws are different. This is a paw from a grizzly bear. Their claws are as long as your fingers, but they're not that sharp. They're somewhat sharp, but not really sharp. So what the grizzly bear does with its claws is it digs in the ground. A lot of its favorite foods grow underground. They like to eat mushrooms and plant roots and insects and mice, and all those things grow underground. So the grizzly bear uses its claws to dig. So let's take a look at the pictures of the two bears. A lot of people coming to Yellowstone get to see these bears just as you drive around. Sometimes when you're hiking, you might see a bear, usually from a safe distance, and you see the bears enjoying, looking for food and taking care of their babies and so on. Now when you see a bear, you can't tell for sure which bear it is by its color. The black bear is called the black bear, but they're not always black. They sometimes have brown fur or blonde fur or cinnamon colored fur, but their official name is black bear. That's their most common color. The grizzly bear is a type of brown bear. They can be any shade of brown. Blondish brown, blackish brown, any kind of brown. So when you see a bear, you can't be sure which bear it is just by its color, and you don't want to get close enough to see if it has long claws or short claws, not to a wild bear. So let me show you some other things you could look at to figure out which bear you're looking at. Black bears have really big ears, about twice as long as the grizzly bears. Black bears have a straight nose. From their nose to their forehead is a straight line. The grizzly bear has shorter ears. They have a bend as you go from their forehead to their nose, and they have a circle in their face that black bears don't have. And grizzly bears, since they're such good diggers, they have really big shoulders, which make them really good at, like, they can flip over a log or a rock because they're so powerful. So those are the two kind of bears. Yellowstone also has 3 kinds of wild dogs. And so you might see the red fox, which is about the size of a cat, and the coyote, which is about the size of 3 cats. These 2 littler dogs, they're so lightweight that they can walk on top of the deep snow without sinking, but they can also dive into the snow face first if they want to try to catch a mouse that they hear under the snow. Now, a lot of Florida people think the coyotes at Yellowstone are huge, because in Florida, the coyotes look pretty small. But that's because in Yellowstone, it's cold. So the coyotes grow thicker, longer fur, which makes them look bigger. But underneath all that fur, they're the same size as Florida coyotes. We also have wolves at Yellowstone. Most years, we have about 80 to 100 wolves living in the park. A wolf weighs about 100 pounds. And most of the wolves in Yellowstone either have gray fur or black fur. About half are each of those colors. And wolves live in a pack, and they hunt elk. They hunt the large animals that they work together as a team to get. Now, a wolf is pretty big. They weigh about 100 pounds, like a big dog, but they don't sink in the deep snow. Now, when people want to stay on top of the snow, they wear snowshoes or they wear skis. If you wear something that makes your feet big and flat, it helps you stay on top of the snow. But wolves, they don't need to wear that extra equipment like people do. This is a paw print from a wolf. Look at how big it is. It's bigger than my fist. Wolves have extra large paws, which make them able to stay on top of the snow because they have such big paws. It's like they're wearing snowshoes. And of course, one of the most common animals that people see at Yellowstone is humans. Here's a bunch of pictures of people enjoying Yellowstone Park. Try to imagine yourself being in any of these pictures. For 150 years, we've been protecting Yellowstone because we want you and your family to be able to come and see all these beautiful things, all this beautiful scenery, these awesome trails. these truly wild animals. These are all things you can see and do at Yellowstone. So hopefully you'll get a chance to come someday if you haven't already. And no matter what season you come to Yellowstone National Park, it's always amazing. It's always beautiful. It's always awesome. So I hope you all get the chance to come visit the world's very first national park. So now, if there's any questions out there, I would be happy to answer them.
So I'm going to give them a few minutes for them to start popping in questions and stuff like that. Ranger Michael, how did you become a ranger at Yellowstone National Park?
A ranger is a job through the government. So you apply through the government website, and there's different kinds of rangers who do different kinds of things. The kind I am, there's rangers who are called interpretive rangers. We help people learn about the park. Like if you're here in the park, we might give you a talk or a lesson or take you on a hike or answer your questions about the park. Or I can talk to school groups like I'm doing right now. You have to have a college degree in something. Could be in science or history or teaching. I was a teacher before I became a ranger. But a lot of people come from all different backgrounds to become rangers. If you just like to, if you have a college degree and you like to help people learn stuff, you could be that ranger. Other rangers are like the police or the law enforcement. They train at an academy to learn those police skills. And we have some rangers who are resource managers, who are like the scientists. They usually need a master's degree, and they go out in the park and they gather data. They collect information about the animals and the geysers and the trees and all the different wild things. And you can do pretty much any job in a national park. We have secretaries and plumbers and carpenters and janitors, any job you can think of. If you just like being in a place like this, you could probably get a job here and get to live here in this place while you do your ordinary job.
Okay. We've got a few questions popping in. How many rangers are actually in the park?
I think in summer, it depends how you define ranger. There's a lot of different job titles, but people who work here, it's usually, I think over 500 ranger type people working in the park every summer, a lot fewer in the winter. But if you include all the employees of all the different types, including the people who work at the restaurants and the hotels in Yellowstone, it's usually about 3,000 people per summer working in the park.
Now, I know that in the winter, you have some of the roads are closed and stuff like that, but you do have guests that come during the winter months, correct?
Yeah, we have the snow is usually on the roads. The snow is usually deeper than I am tall. So it's too deep to plow, especially since a lot of Yellowstone's roads are along cliff edges. So it's too dangerous to plow. But we have snowmobiles, which can drive on top of the snow. So for the winter, we let the snow pile up and then we groom it for snowmobiles and people. We also have snow coaches, which are sort of like vans with really big, huge tires that can drive on top of the snow. So people who come in the winter have to have some sort of vehicle that can drive on top of the snow. And then when you can enjoy skiing and so on. Let's see if I can find some pictures of people enjoying Yellowstone in winter. Here's some skiers enjoying the park in winter. I'm in trouble adjusting to this camera.
Okay. We've got another question coming in. How often do you find skulls and antlers?
Oh, it's pretty common. We have so many animals, including predators here in the park. So with all these wild animals, some are going to die out in the wild. Some are going to get eaten by predators. And so when you go hiking in Yellowstone, it is pretty common to see some bones or skulls or antlers lying around. Now, you're allowed to pick those up and look at them, but every bit of nature is protected in a national park. So that includes the pine cones, the feathers, the flowers, anything you find, you're allowed to touch it and look at it. Well, you don't want to touch the hot springs, of course, but you can look at those things, but you're generally not allowed to keep anything you find in the national park. Even the things I've showed you, like the antler I showed you or the bones I showed you, even us rangers have to get special permission to collect something to take it out of the park. And technically, these are still in the park, but they're in a building in the park that I showed you today.
We have a student that wants to know some of the names of the bacteria that we saw in the hot spots.
Oh man, there are hundreds and hundreds of different species of bacteria. Some of my favorites are named Zygogonium, Aquaficales, Chloroflexus. There's so many different kinds of bacteria. One scientist has been studying one pool of hot water at the Mammoth Hot Springs. In that one pool, he's found over 600 species of bacteria, and
Wow.
many of those don't exist anywhere else in the world except that one pool. And we have 10,000 hot water pools here. So there's more bacteria than we could know about.
Someone's asking, do you ever have any grizzly attacks?
Once in a while, most people know better than to get close to a grizzly, but once in a while, if someone surprises a bear, like if you're out hiking and the bear didn't hear you, didn't see you, didn't smell you, and you surprise it, the bear might try to chase you. Or if you're getting too close to that bear's food or that bear's babies, the mama bear is not going to like that very much. The most common way people get attacked by bears is they go jogging through bear country, and bears are predators. So if you're running, they think they're supposed to chase you. So the worst thing to do if you see a bear is to run. But mostly what we tell people is pay attention when you're hiking, look around you, listen, so that you don't surprise any bears. And we tell people to make some noise as you're hiking so the bears hear you. And if they hear you, they don't want to see people. They're kind of afraid of people. So if they hear you, they're going to move out of the way. So make sure there's no surprises when you go hiking. But it's pretty rare. We get a lot more people attacked by the bison and the elk than we do from the bears.
I saw an interesting video about a month or so ago of bison jumping up and down through the snow. Can they really jump?
Bison are super athletes. They can jump over 6-foot obstacles without even thinking about it. They can run up and down hills better than humans can. They can go 30 miles per hour, which is faster than Usain Bolt can run. And they're better swimmers than we are too. So bison look big and clumsy, but they are super athletic. And so it's best to keep out of their personal space so they don't get upset with you.
And I also saw one time a red fox that actually can dive into the snow. Is that the red fox?
Yeah, they do that quite often. Coyotes do that too. So yeah, they one of their favorite foods is mice, which live under the snow, whereas the fox is up on top of the snow. So the fox, when the fox hears a mouse underneath the snow, it'll jump up in the air and go face first into the snow, and often comes back with a mouse between its teeth.
Oh, wow. So Sarah wants to know, what's the most common animal skull that you find?
Oh gosh, it's hard to say. Probably the just hiking around the park, I would say I see the elk skulls the most, because the elk are an animal the predators go after a lot, and we have more elk than any other large animal. So I think the elk skull is probably what I see the most around the park.
And then we have another question that says, what is the best way to get out of a grizzly attack?
The best way is to just back away. Don't run, because they will chase you if you run. But mostly the bear's going to run away. Usually if they know people are around, they move out of there. But if the bear's not moving away, you should just back away. Don't run. Just give the space. We recommend people have 100 yards between a bear. So that's a football field away from a bear. So make sure they have that space. Nobody likes it if someone gets in your personal space. That makes you feel very awkward. And with a bear, that's 100 yards. So if you can go like this and hide the bear behind your finger, you're a safe distance away. If the bear is sticking out from behind your finger, you should back away slowly. But it's pretty rare for a bear to attack people.
Okay. Well, I guess the questions are running out, so we'll call that kind of a wrap up then, Ranger Michael. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it. We've learned a lot, and you've got some really great photos. I love going to national parks and viewing and taking pictures and stuff like that. And
yeah, I noticed you've got a picture of Yellowstone behind you.
Yeah, this is a picture from about, I've been 3 times. This is from like 12 years ago, I think. So I think it's looking towards the falls over to my right there and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So love it. So thank you so much for joining us. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll put more information on our website. So if we've got some information on our website, we have one more virtual learning experience tomorrow afternoon, and it's our friends at the Norton Museum. They're going to show us travel the world with artworks from all over the world in the Norton, and that's tomorrow at 1:00 p.m. And just so you know, on our website, we have on the left-hand side on the navigation screen, we have an entire web page dedicated to our virtual learning experiences where we can share information with you and other ideas. You can find that at edtechtraining.palmbeachschools.org. And you can find that, and you can also see the videos. And so for people that want to go back and watch the videos, you're welcome to do that. And we want to thank everyone for being with us today. We want to thank you from the training team as well as the entire educational technology team. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you have a great week and a great summer. And thanks for joining us.